The Galactic Research Station Kepler 442 hummed with the constant vibration of its massive engines, keeping the facility in stable orbit around the gas giant Torin Prime. Dr. Sarah Chun stepped off the transport shuttle, her worn boots making contact with the polished metal deck plates for the first time. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth standard, making her already tired muscles protest after the 3-week journey through hyperspace. Around her, beings from dozens of different species moved with practiced efficiency through the docking bay. The Zephyrians floated past on their gossamer wings, their crystalline bodies catching the overhead lighting and casting rainbow patterns on the walls. A group of Caraxian engineers, their thick carapaces gleaming under the harsh fluorescence, hauled equipment with their 4 powerful arms while chattering in their clicking language. Near the far wall, a delegation of Threnodai diplomats glided silently, their elongated forms wrapped in flowing robes that seemed to move independently of any breeze. Sarah adjusted the strap of her single duffel bag and checked the data pad containing her assignment orders. Xenobiology Research Division, Level 7, Section C. She had dreamed of this moment for years, ever since humanity had been grudgingly accepted into the Galactic Confederation as a junior member species. The fact that she was only the 4th human to ever be assigned to a major research facility was not lost on her. "Excuse me," she said to a passing Zentorian clerk, whose purple skin was marked with the intricate tattoos that denoted his administrative rank. "Could you direct me to Level 7? The Zentorian's 3 eyes focused on her with what she had learned was barely concealed disdain. His translator collar rendered his words in crisp, emotionless tones. "Human, you will find the transit pods at the end of this corridor. Try not to damage anything with your primitive understanding of technology." Sarah forced a polite smile. "Thank you for the directions." As she made her way through the corridor, she couldn't help but notice the stares and whispered conversations that followed in her wake. Humans had only made contact with the galactic community 15 years ago, when a Confederation survey ship had detected Earth's radio signals and decided to investigate. The discovery that humans were not only sentient but had achieved space flight on their own had sent shockwaves through the established order. Most species had been contacted by the Confederation when they were still in primitive stages of development, guided carefully through centuries of technological advancement under alien supervision. Humans had done it themselves, in a mere few thousand years of civilization, with no outside help whatsoever. This fact made many of the older species uncomfortable, though they were reluctant to admit why. The transit pod Sarah entered was designed for beings much larger than humans, forcing her to climb up into a seat that left her feet dangling like a child's. The pod's AI spoke in the same universal translation protocol used throughout the station. Destination: Level 7, Section C, Xenobiology Division. Warning: this destination contains active research on dangerous life forms. All personnel must be accompanied by a senior researcher or security escort. Please provide authorization code. Sarah consulted her data pad and read off the string of numbers and letters she had been given. The pod remained silent for a long moment, then spoke again with what sounded like reluctance. Authorization confirmed. Please note that the Confederation assumes no responsibility for injury or death resulting from human error or insufficient biological safeguards. The pod lurched into motion, carrying her through a transparent tube that wound its way through the station's superstructure. Through the clear walls, Sarah could see the vast research laboratories and living quarters that made up the facility. Massive observation domes provided views of the gas giant below, its swirling clouds of methane and ammonia creating patterns that shifted like living things. When the pod finally came to a stop, Sarah found herself in a corridor lined with laboratories behind reinforced transparent barriers. Through the first window, she could see a researcher in an environmental suit working with what appeared to be a gelatinous mass that pulsed with its own internal light. The next lab contained something that looked like a tree, if trees had writhing tentacles instead of branches, and screamed in frequencies that made her bones ache. "You must be the human." Sarah turned to find herself facing a being she recognized as a Valdorian, though she had never seen one in person before. Dr. Kexlon stood nearly 8 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in the distinctive blue-green scales that marked his species as one of the Confederation's premier researchers. His elongated skull housed a brain nearly twice the size of a human's, and his 4 arms ended in delicate manipulator appendages capable of incredibly precise work. "Dr. Chun," Sarah said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm pleased to be working with you." Dr. Kexlon looked at her outstretched hand with what might have been curiosity or disgust. Yes, well, I suppose we must make do with what the Council assigns us. Your species' reputation for unpredictability precedes you. I prefer to think of it as adaptability, Sarah replied, lowering her hand. I've reviewed the research proposals for this facility. The work you're doing on predator-prey relationships in extreme environments is groundbreaking. Indeed, which is why it requires beings capable of understanding the subtle complexities involved. Your species has only recently discovered that there are other forms of life beyond your single world. I have been studying xenobiology for longer than your species has had written language. Sarah felt her temper begin to rise, but forced herself to remain calm. I understand I have a lot to learn. That's why I'm here. Dr. Kexlon gestured with two of his arms toward the far end of the corridor. Your workstation has been prepared. You will begin by cataloging sample data from our recent expedition to the Nightmare Nebula. Perhaps handling such elementary tasks will help you develop an appreciation for proper scientific methodology. As they walked, Sarah noticed that the other researchers in the corridor had stopped their work to watch. A crystalline from Xerion floated near one of the lab entrances, its geometric body refracting light in patterns that suggested amusement. Several Threnidae had gathered near another lab, their whispered conversations creating a sound like wind through autumn leaves. Is there something I should know about the samples from the Nightmare Nebula? Sarah asked. Only that they represent some of the most dangerous life forms ever encountered by Confederation explorers, Dr. Kexlon replied casually. The expedition lost 3 ships and 47 crew members before we managed to retrieve even these few specimens. But, I suppose for a species that evolved on a planet filled with venomous creatures, carnivorous plants, and weather patterns capable of leveling entire cities, it should present no particular challenge. The workstation Dr. Kexlon led her to was clearly an afterthought, squeezed into a corner of what had obviously once been a storage closet. The computer terminal was an older model that had been salvaged from some other department, and the chair had been adjusted to its lowest setting but still left Sarah's feet barely touching the floor. The sample containers are in the sealed storage unit, Dr. Kexlon said, pointing to a reinforced cabinet that hummed with the sound of active containment fields. You will record the basic physical characteristics of each specimen, noting any obvious biological markers or behavioral patterns. The work is quite routine, though I understand your species has difficulty with tasks requiring prolonged concentration. Sarah activated the computer terminal and pulled up the research protocol she had memorized during her journey to the station. How many specimens are we dealing with? 43 distinct organisms, ranging from microscopic parasites to a Class 7 apex predator. The latter, of course, will require special handling procedures that I will oversee personally. Your role will be limited to the less dangerous specimens. What makes it a Class 7? Dr. Kexlon's expression, as much as Sarah could read it on his alien features, suggested he found the question tedious. Class 7 designation indicates a life form capable of posing a significant threat to multiple intelligent species simultaneously. This particular specimen demonstrated the ability to eliminate an entire research team in under 12 minutes, despite their advanced protective equipment and weapons. It shows signs of intelligence, adaptability, and predatory instincts that surpass anything in our previous databases. Has anyone been able to establish communication with it? Communication? Dr. Kexlon's scales rippled in what Sarah had learned was the Valdorian equivalent of laughter. Human, this creature exists solely to kill and consume other life forms. The concept of communication is meaningless to such a being. We study it to understand how to defend against others like it, not to have a conversation. Sarah nodded and began reviewing the safety protocols on her screen. The procedures were extensive and covered everything from containment field maintenance to emergency evacuation routes. As she read, she became aware that the normal sounds of the laboratory had quieted. Researchers who had been moving freely through the corridor now walked more carefully, speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Kexlon called a voice from behind them. Sarah turned to see a Caraxian security chief approaching, his carapace bearing the scars of what must have been numerous battles. We have a situation with Specimen 43. What sort of situation, Chief Mordak? The containment field is functioning perfectly, but the creature has become active. It appears to be responding to something, though our sensors detect no change in its environment. The other specimens in proximity storage have also begun exhibiting unusual behavior patterns. Dr. Kexlon's scales darkened, which Sarah had learned indicated concern or frustration. Show me the readings. Chief Mordak activated a portable display unit, projecting a three-dimensional representation of the storage area into the air above his arm. The display showed a complex grid of containment fields, with most showing the steady blue glow that indicated normal operation. But several fields pulsed with yellow warning indicators, and one in the center of the array flashed an ominous red. Specimen 43 began this behavior approximately 37 minutes ago, Chief Mordak explained. The pattern corresponds with the arrival of the transport shuttle from Earth. All eyes turned to Sarah, who suddenly felt very small and very far from home. Dr. Kexlan's forearms crossed in a gesture that needed no translation. Explain this, human. I don't understand, Sarah said, looking at the display. How could my arrival affect a contained specimen? I haven't been anywhere near the storage area, and I certainly haven't had any contact with any of the organisms. Nevertheless, the correlation is undeniable, Dr. Kexlan said. Chief Mordak, increase containment field strength to maximum levels and deploy additional security teams to the storage area. Dr. Chun, you will remain here and begin your assigned work. Under no circumstances are you to approach the restricted storage area without direct supervision. As Chief Mordak hurried away, Sarah found herself alone with Dr. Kexlan, who regarded her with undisguised suspicion. Your species continues to demonstrate its capacity for causing unforeseen complications. Perhaps this assignment was premature. With respect, Dr. Kexlan, you have no evidence that my presence has anything to do with the creature's behavior. Correlation doesn't equal causation, as I'm sure you're aware from your extensive research experience. The Valdorian scales rippled again, but this time with what Sarah thought might be irritation. Your species' tendency toward defiance is well documented. I suggest you focus that energy on your assigned tasks rather than questioning the observations of your superiors. Sarah bit back her response and turned to the computer terminal. The first few specimens in the database were relatively harmless-looking organisms that resembled nothing so much as Earth's deep-sea creatures. She began the methodical process of recording their physical characteristics, noting the bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly, and the way their transparent flesh revealed complex internal structures that defied easy classification. As she worked, Sarah became aware of a strange sensation, like someone was watching her. She looked around the laboratory, but Dr. Kexlan had moved to another workstation and the other researchers were focused on their own projects. The feeling persisted, however, growing stronger as the hours passed. During her lunch break, Sarah made her way to the station's main observation deck, hoping to clear her head and gain some perspective on her situation. The vast window provided a stunning view of Tauran Prime's swirling atmosphere, with its layers of colored gases creating patterns that seemed almost alive. Other staff members moved through the area, but Sarah noticed they gave her a wide berth, as if she carried some invisible contamination. Not quite what you expected, is it? Sarah turned to find herself facing another human, a man in his 50s with graying hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent years in space. She recognized him from the personnel files she had reviewed during her journey. Dr. Marcus Webb, she said, the only other human assigned to this station. Former assignment, he corrected with a bitter smile. I'm being transferred back to Earth at the end of the week. Apparently, my research into Confederation military history has made certain parties uncomfortable. I'm sorry to hear that. I was hoping to have another human to talk with about adapting to life here. Dr. Webb gestured toward the observation window, where several groups of aliens stood at what Sarah now realized was a careful distance from the two humans. You'll find that adaptation involves accepting your place in the established hierarchy. Humans are tolerated here, not welcomed. We're seen as unpredictable variables in an otherwise ordered system. Dr. Kexlan mentioned something about specimens reacting to my arrival. Have you experienced anything like that? Dr. Webb's expression grew serious. More than I care to admit. There's something about humans that affects certain types of alien life forms in ways the Confederation doesn't fully understand. They prefer to ignore it rather than investigate, because the implications make them uncomfortable. What kind of implications? The kind that suggest humans might not be as inferior as they'd like to believe. Dr. Webb looked around the observation deck, noting the way conversations had quieted when they began speaking. A word of advice, Dr. Chun. Be very careful about demonstrating any unusual abilities or insights. The Confederation values stability above all else, and humans have a tendency to disrupt established patterns. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, an emergency klaxon began sounding throughout the station. The automated announcement system activated, speaking in the Universal Translation Protocol. Security Alert Level 3. All non-essential personnel report to designated safety areas. Essential research staff report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Through the observation window, Sarah could see security vehicles moving with urgent purpose through the station's external corridors. Dr. Webb grabbed her arm. That's the Xenobiology Division alarm. Something's happened to one of the specimens. They hurried through corridors filled with rushing personnel toward Level 7. When they arrived at Section C, they found the area in controlled chaos. Security teams in full environmental suits had cordoned off the storage area, and researchers huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Chief Mordak approached them. His carapace darkened with stress markers. Dr. Webb, Dr. Chun, you should not be here. What happened? Sarah asked. Specimen 43 broke containment. The creature somehow disrupted its containment field from the inside, a feat that should have been impossible given its known capabilities. We have managed to establish a secondary perimeter, but the situation remains critical. Dr. Kexlon appeared from the direction of the Emergency Command Center, his scales cycling through colors that indicated extreme agitation. When he saw Sarah, his 4 arms gestured in what she had learned was the Valdorian equivalent of pointing an accusatory finger. This began with your arrival, human. The correlation can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. I still don't understand how. Silence. Dr. Kexlon's voice carried the authority of years of command. Chief Mordak, what is the current status of the creature? It has not attempted to breach the secondary containment, but it continues to exhibit unprecedented behavior. The creature appears to be searching for something. Its movements suggest purposeful exploration rather than random aggression. Sarah felt the strange sensation of being watched intensify, and suddenly, she understood. It's looking for me. The gathered researchers turned to stare at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to terror. Dr. Kexlon's scales shifted to a deep red that Sarah had never seen before. That is impossible. You have had no contact with any of the specimens. You have not even been in the same section of the station as the storage area. But the timing of its activation, its current behavior pattern, the way the other specimens are responding. Sarah looked around at the assembled aliens, seeing her own growing certainty reflected in their increasingly uncomfortable expressions. It's been aware of my presence since I arrived. Chief Mordak activated his portable display unit again, showing the current status of the storage area. Specimen 43 appeared as a large red indicator moving in slow, deliberate patterns within the secondary containment area. As they watched, the creature's movement changed, becoming more focused and directed. It's moving toward our location, Chief Mordak reported unnecessarily, as the display made the creature's new trajectory obvious to everyone present. Dr. Kexlon began issuing rapid orders in his native language, and security personnel moved to establish additional barriers between the storage area and the research section. But Sarah found herself stepping forward, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand. Wait, she said. Before you escalate this situation any further, let me try something. Absolutely not, Dr. Kexlon snapped. You will not be permitted anywhere near that creature. Dr. Kexlon, with respect, your current approach isn't working. The creature broke out of containment that should have been impossible to breach. Maybe it's time to try a different strategy. The Valdorian scales cycled through several colors as he processed this suggestion. Around them, the other researchers watched in fascination as the human newcomer challenged the authority of one of the station's most senior scientists. The risk is unacceptable, Dr. Kexlon finally said. Specimen 43 eliminated an entire research team of experienced xenobiologists in 12 minutes. You are a single human with no practical experience in dealing with hostile alien life forms. But I might be the only one who can communicate with it. The silence that followed Sarah's statement was broken only by the distant sound of the emergency klaxons and the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Chief Mordak's display showed the creature had stopped moving and was now positioned directly between the storage area and their current location, as if it was waiting for something. Dr. Webb spoke quietly. The Confederation has never encountered a life form capable of detecting the presence of a specific individual from such distances, especially across sealed bulkheads and containment fields. If Dr. Chun is right about the creature seeking her out specifically, then we're dealing with abilities that our current understanding of xenobiology can't explain. Which is exactly why the risk is too great, Dr. Kexlon replied. We know nothing about this creature's true capabilities or intentions. Sarah looked at the display showing the creature's stationary position and made a decision that would change everything that followed. Then, it's time we learned. Before anyone could stop her, she began walking toward the storage area, following the clear path that would lead her to whatever was waiting in the darkness beyond the secondary containment barriers. Sarah's footsteps echoed through the emergency-lit corridors as she made her way toward the storage area, followed at a distance by the security team that Chief Mordak had reluctantly assigned to monitor her progress. Their environmental suits made soft mechanical sounds with each step, while her simple research uniform provided no protection against whatever she might encounter beyond the containment barriers. The sensation of being watched had grown stronger with each step, evolving into something that felt almost like recognition. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, a presence in her mind that didn't feel invasive or threatening, but rather curious and oddly familiar. She tried to rationalize the feeling as stress-induced imagination, but the rational part of her mind was rapidly being overwhelmed by instincts she hadn't known she possessed. The secondary containment barrier appeared ahead of her, a shimmering wall of energy that blocked the corridor leading to the main storage area. Beyond it, emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows, making the familiar research facility look alien and threatening. Chief Mordak's voice crackled through the communication system built into the barrier control station. Dr. Chun, please reconsider this course of action. We can maintain the secondary containment indefinitely while we develop alternative solutions. Sarah paused at the barrier controls, studying the readings that showed the creature's position just beyond the energy wall. Chief Mordak, in your experience, how long can a Class 7 specimen remain active without sustaining itself? What happens when it gets hungry? The silence that followed her question told her everything she needed to know. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Kexlon arguing with Dr. Webb about the wisdom of allowing her to proceed, while other researchers debated the creature's likely behavior patterns and potential escape routes. The creature has been in stasis for the past 3 weeks, Chief Mordak finally admitted. We have no data on its metabolic requirements or feeding patterns in an active state. Sarah nodded and activated the barrier controls. Then, we can't afford to wait and see what happens when it decides to find its own solution to that problem. The energy barrier flickered and disappeared, leaving nothing between Sarah and whatever waited in the darkness ahead. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, immediately noticing how the temperature dropped and the air itself seemed to thicken with an electric tension that made her skin prickle. The corridor beyond the barrier had been damaged during the creature's escape, with scorch marks on the walls and several light fixtures hanging at odd angles. Emergency backup lighting provided just enough illumination to see that the path ahead curved to the right, disappearing around a corner that blocked her view of the main storage area. As she walked, Sarah became aware of a new sound, a low rhythmic vibration that she felt more than heard. It reminded her of the purring of a large cat, but deeper and more complex, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in her bones. The sound grew stronger as she approached the corner, and she realized that whatever was making it had detected her approach. When she rounded the corner, Sarah found herself facing something that defied easy description. The creature that had broken out of containment was roughly the size of a large earth tiger, but there the resemblance ended. Its body was covered in what appeared to be living shadow, a darkness so complete that it seemed to absorb light rather than simply lacking it. Within that darkness, patterns of bioluminescence flickered in complex sequences, creating designs that reminded her simultaneously of neural networks and star charts. The creature's head was elongated and angular, with features that shifted and changed as she watched, as if its physical form was not entirely fixed. Where eyes should have been, twin points of light regarded her with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and evaluating. When it moved, which it did with fluid grace, the darkness that comprised its body flowed like liquid while maintaining perfect structural integrity. What struck Sarah most, however, was not the creature's alien appearance, but the immediate certainty that it meant her no harm. The presence she had sensed in her mind intensified, and she realized that the creature was not just aware of her, but was actively communicating through some means that bypassed language entirely. Images flashed through her consciousness, not her own memories, but something else's perception of events she had not witnessed. She saw the Nightmare Nebula as the creature experienced it, a region of space where the normal laws of physics operated differently, where life had evolved forms and abilities that challenged every assumption about what was possible. She saw the research expedition that had captured this creature, understanding for the first time the fear and confusion it had experienced when torn away from its natural environment. But underlying these alien memories was something else, a recognition that transcended species boundaries. The creature had been searching not just for escape, but for something familiar in a universe full of beings it could not understand. When it had detected her presence on the station, it had found what it was looking for. Sarah took a slow step forward, keeping her movements non-threatening and her mind as open as possible to the strange communication that was taking place. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to new configurations, and she had the distinct impression that it was pleased by her approach. Behind her, she could hear the security team maintaining their position at the barrier, their sensors undoubtedly recording everything that was happening. She could imagine Dr. Kexlon watching the feeds, trying to understand what he was seeing while simultaneously preparing to order an emergency evacuation if the situation deteriorated. The creature moved closer to her, its shadow form rippling with each step. When it was close enough to touch, it stopped and lowered its head in what Sarah instinctively recognized as a gesture of greeting. Without fully understanding why, she reached out her hand toward the creature's dark form. The moment her skin made contact with the creature's surface, Sarah's consciousness exploded with sensation. She found herself experiencing the universe from a perspective that was utterly alien, yet somehow comprehensible. The creature's awareness extended far beyond the normal spectrum of senses, detecting patterns of energy and matter that human science had not yet discovered. Through its senses, she could perceive every living being on the station, their emotional states creating distinctive energy signatures that were as visible as colors. The fear and confusion radiating from the research staff appeared as jagged red patterns, while the controlled aggression of the security teams manifested as sharp orange spikes. Her own presence appeared as something entirely different, a complex weaving of curiosity, determination, and empathy that the creature found both familiar and comforting. But the most startling revelation was how the creature perceived the relationship between different species. Where humans saw the Confederation as a hierarchical structure based on technological advancement and political power, the creature's enhanced senses revealed a different truth. Each species radiated distinctive patterns that reflected not their official status, but their fundamental nature and potential. The Valdorians, despite their advanced technology and dominant position, showed patterns of rigidity and fear of change that limited their ability to adapt to new situations. The Zentorians displayed complex webs of social obligation that prioritized conformity over innovation. The Caraxians radiated strength and loyalty, but within narrow parameters that made them excellent followers rather than leaders. Humans, by contrast, showed patterns that the creature found endlessly fascinating. Where other species displayed relatively stable energy signatures that remained consistent over time, humans radiated constantly changing configurations that reflected their species' fundamental adaptability and unpredictability. It was this quality that had drawn the creature's attention, recognizing in humanity something that resonated with its own nature. The communication lasted only moments in real time, but when Sarah withdrew her hand, she felt as though she had gained years of experience and understanding. The creature's bioluminescent patterns had stabilized into a configuration that she somehow knew indicated contentment and trust. Dr. Chun. Chief Mordak's voice reached her through the communication system, tight, with barely controlled tension. Please report your status. Sarah looked back toward the barrier where the security team waited, then at the creature that now regarded her with what could only be described as expectation. I'm fine, Chief Mordak. The creature is not hostile. It was searching for communication, not prey. That is not possible. Dr. Kexlon's voice cut through the comm system. Specimen 43 showed no signs of advanced intelligence during our initial examinations. It eliminated a research team without any attempt at communication. Sarah felt the creature's response to Dr. Kexlon's words, a wave of frustrated anger that made her understand the true nature of the previous encounter. Dr. Kexlon, how exactly did the research team attempt to communicate with the creature? Standard protocols were followed. The creature was contained and observed while researchers attempted to establish basic behavioral patterns. So they trapped it in an energy cage and studied it like a laboratory specimen? The silence that followed confirmed Sarah's suspicion. Through her contact with the creature, she had gained insight into how it experienced imprisonment and observation by beings it could not understand or communicate with. The research team's deaths had not been the result of predatory behavior, but a desperate attempt to escape what it had perceived as torture. The creature's actions were defensive, not aggressive, Sarah continued. It's a highly intelligent being that was responding to what it saw as a threat to its survival. But it's not naturally hostile to other forms of life. The creature moved closer to her again, and Sarah felt another wave of complex communication. Images flashed through her mind showing the creature's natural environment, a region of space where multiple intelligent species existed in symbiotic relationships, each contributing unique abilities to collective survival. The creature's role in this ecosystem was that of a coordinator and protector, using its enhanced perceptual abilities to detect threats and opportunities that other species might miss. It wants to return home, Sarah said, translating the creature's communication for the benefit of the listening research team. But it's also curious about us, about humanity specifically. It recognizes something in humans that reminds it of its own species. Dr. Chun, Dr. Webb's voice came through the comm system, carefully controlled but carrying an undertone of excitement. Are you saying the creature is capable of interspecies communication? More than capable. It's been trying to communicate since it was captured, but the research team couldn't detect or interpret its attempts. Its communication methods are based on direct neural interface rather than verbal or visual signals. The implications of this revelation were staggering, and Sarah could hear urgent conversations beginning among the research staff. A species capable of direct neural communication with other intelligent beings represented a breakthrough that could revolutionize the Confederation's understanding of interspecies relations. But even as she considered the scientific significance of her discovery, Sarah was becoming aware of something else the creature was trying to communicate. Through their neural link, she sensed its perception of other life forms contained in the storage facility, dozens of specimens that had been collected from various expeditions throughout the galaxy. The creature's enhanced senses could detect the emotional states of these captive beings, and what it showed her made Sarah's stomach tighten with horror. Many of the specimens were not the simple organisms they had been classified as, but intelligent beings capable of suffering, fear, and despair. They had been torn from their natural environments and imprisoned in containment fields with no understanding of what had happened to them or why. There are others, Sarah said, her voice carrying new urgency. Other intelligent species that have been misclassified as simple organisms. They're aware, they're suffering, and they've been trying to communicate just like this creature. The communication feed from the barrier area erupted with voices as researchers argued about the implications of Sarah's statement. Dr. Kexlon's scales were cycling through colors so rapidly that his emotional state was impossible to interpret, while Chief Mordak began issuing orders for additional security measures. But Sarah's attention was focused on the creature before her, which was now displaying new patterns of bioluminescence that conveyed a sense of urgency and purpose. Through their neural link, she understood that it was not content to simply escape or return to its home territory. It had found in her something it had been searching for, a being capable of bridging the gap between different forms of consciousness. The creature wanted her help, not just for itself, but for all the other captive beings whose intelligence had gone unrecognized by their captors. It was asking her to become a translator and advocate, to use her unique ability to communicate across species boundaries to prevent other intelligent beings from suffering the same fate. Sarah felt the weight of the decision before her. Agreeing to help the creature would mean challenging the fundamental assumptions that govern the Confederation's research practices. It would mean confronting a scientific establishment that had classified dozens of intelligent beings as simple organisms suitable for experimentation and study. But as she looked into the points of light that served as the creature's eyes, she realized that she had no choice. The connection she had formed with this being had shown her a universe far more complex and interconnected than she had ever imagined. To ignore that knowledge would be to betray not just the creature before her, but every intelligent being that suffered in ignorance and isolation. "I'll help you," she said aloud, knowing that the creature would understand her commitment through their neural link. "But we'll need to do this carefully. The Confederation won't easily accept that they've been wrong about so many species." The creature's response was a wave of gratitude mixed with determination. Through their connection, Sarah began to understand the scope of what they would need to accomplish. It would not be enough to simply free the captive beings in the storage facility. They would need to establish a new framework for interspecies communication, one that could detect and interpret forms of intelligence that existed outside the narrow parameters the Confederation had established. It was an enormous undertaking that would challenge the very foundations of galactic society. But, as Sarah felt the creature's confidence in her abilities, she began to believe that it might actually be possible. Behind her, the voices from the communication system had died down as the research team waited for her next move. She could feel their uncertainty and fear, but also their growing recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Chief Mordak," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I'm going to need access to the specimen storage database. All of it, including the classified files on the organisms collected from the Nightmare Nebula expedition. That information is restricted to senior research staff only. Then, you'd better get Dr. Kexlon down here, because we have a lot of work to do." As she spoke, the creature beside her began displaying new patterns of bioluminescence, configurations that somehow conveyed a sense of anticipation and hope. Through their neural link, Sarah could feel its eagerness to begin the process of freeing its fellow captives and establishing genuine communication between species that had been separated by misunderstanding and fear. The real work was just beginning. Dr. Kexlon's arrival in the storage area was accompanied by a full complement of senior researchers and additional security personnel, their combined presence turning the narrow corridor into a crowded forum of scientific debate and barely contained panic. The Valdorian scales had settled into a deep purple that Sarah had learned indicated intense concentration mixed with significant stress. "Dr. Chan," he said, his forearms gesturing toward the creature that remained calmly at her side. "You will step away from specimen 43 immediately and report to the medical bay for comprehensive neural screening." "The creature has a name," Sarah replied, maintaining her position beside the being she had begun to think of as Echo, a designation that had emerged from their neural communication. "And I'm not leaving until we address the situation with the other captive intelligences." "There are no other captive intelligences," Dr. Kexlon stated with the authority of absolute certainty. "Every organism in our storage facility has been thoroughly examined and classified according to established protocols. We do not imprison sentient beings." Echo's bioluminescent patterns shifted to configurations that conveyed skepticism and concern. Through their neural link, Sarah could feel the creature's perception of the other beings held in containment throughout the facility. The emotional signatures it detected painted a picture of suffering and confusion that contradicted everything the Confederation believed about its research practices. "Dr. Kexlon, your classification protocols are based on narrow definitions of intelligence that don't account for non-standard forms of consciousness," Sarah said. "You're looking for intelligence that resembles your own, but missing entirely different ways of thinking and communicating." Chief Mordak activated his portable display unit, projecting a three-dimensional map of the storage facility that showed the location and status of every contained organism. Red indicators marked specimens that had shown increased activity since Echo's escape, while yellow warnings highlighted containment fields that were operating at elevated power levels to maintain stability. 17 specimens have exhibited behavioral changes since your interaction with specimen 43, Chief Mordak reported. "The pattern suggests some form of remote stimulation, possibly through electromagnetic or quantum entanglement effects." Dr. Webb pushed through the crowd of researchers, his expression showing a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Dr. Chun, what you're suggesting would revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and intelligence. But the implications for our existing research programs would be catastrophic. Hundreds of studies would need to be re-evaluated, and countless hours of work would be rendered invalid." Sarah felt Echo's response to the conversation, a wave of frustration mixed with determination. The creature understood the political and scientific obstacles they faced, but its enhanced perception of the suffering beings throughout the facility made compromise impossible. "Dr. Webb, the implications for our captive subjects are already catastrophic," Sarah replied. "If we're holding intelligent beings in containment without their consent or understanding, then every day we delay addressing this situation makes us complicit in their suffering." Dr. Kexlon's scales shifted to a deep red that Sarah had learned indicated anger approaching the limits of his control. "You have been on this station for less than one day, yet you presume to challenge research methodologies that have been developed over centuries by the finest scientific minds in the Confederation. Your species' arrogance continues to exceed even our lowest expectations." It's not arrogance, Sarah said, feeling Echo's confidence flow through their neural connection. It's perspective. Humans evolved on a planet where we had to coexist with thousands of different species, each with their own forms of intelligence and communication. We learned early that intelligence takes many forms, and that understanding requires empathy as much as analysis. She gestured toward Echo, whose form seemed to pulse with gentle light in response to her words. This being has spent its entire existence in a symbiotic ecosystem where multiple species work together, sharing information and resources through direct neural communication. It can perceive forms of consciousness that your instruments can't detect. Even if your claims were accurate, Dr. Kexlon said, we cannot simply release specimens without proper authorization from the Confederation Council. The protocols exist to prevent dangerous organisms from threatening civilian populations. Echo's patterns shifted again, and Sarah felt a new wave of information flow through their connection. The creature was showing her something it had discovered through its enhanced senses, a truth about the research station that none of the staff suspected. Dr. Kexlon, how many research staff have reported unusual dreams or psychological effects since beginning work on this station? The Valdorian scales flickered between colors, suggesting confusion about the apparent change of subject. Psychological effects are common in deep space assignments. The isolation and artificial environment create stress that manifests in various ways. But these aren't normal stress reactions, Sarah continued, interpreting what Echo was showing her. Multiple intelligent beings held in close proximity are creating a collective unconscious effect, bleeding emotional and psychic energy into the station's atmosphere. Your researchers are experiencing the dreams and fears of captive intelligences without realizing it. Chief Mordak consulted his data files, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Medical reports do show an unusually high incidence of sleep disturbances, anxiety disorders, and unexplained emotional volatility among station personnel. We attributed it to the challenging nature of the work and the extended deployment schedules. Dr. Webb stepped closer to Sarah and Echo, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. Dr. Chun, if what you're saying is true, then we're not just studying these organisms. They're affecting us in ways we don't understand. The implications for research objectivity alone would be staggering. Through her connection with Echo, Sarah could perceive the complex web of psychic influence that permeated the research station. Dozens of intelligent beings, each trapped and confused, were unconsciously projecting their distress into the surrounding environment. The effect was subtle but cumulative, gradually warping the judgment and emotional stability of everyone who worked in close proximity to the storage areas. It's worse than that, Sarah said, her voice carrying new urgency. Some of the specimens aren't just projecting distress. They're actively trying to influence their captors, attempting to communicate through the only means available to them. Your researchers have been making decisions based on unconscious input from the beings they're studying. The implications of this revelation sent waves of shocked conversation through the assembled researchers. If their scientific objectivity had been compromised by psychic influence from their subjects, then every conclusion they had reached, every classification they had made, would need to be re-examined. Dr. Kexlon's scales cycled rapidly through several colors as he processed the scope of what Sarah was suggesting. This is impossible. Our screening protocols would have detected any form of psychic or telepathic ability in the specimens. Only if you were looking for the right indicators, Sarah replied. Your protocols assume that psychic abilities would manifest in ways similar to the few telepathic species already known to the Confederation. But intelligence and communication in the universe are far more diverse than your current understanding allows. Echo moved closer to one of the damaged wall panels, its shadow form flowing around the twisted metal and exposed circuitry. As it touched the damaged systems, its bioluminescent patterns shifted to new configurations that somehow conveyed technical information directly to Sarah's consciousness. The containment systems are failing, Sarah said, interpreting Echo's communication. Not mechanically, but energetically. The collective psychic pressure from the captive beings is gradually degrading the quantum matrices that maintain the containment fields. If this continues, we're going to have multiple containment breaches simultaneously. Chief Mordak immediately activated his communication systems, contacting the station's engineering department to request comprehensive diagnostics on all containment systems. The response he received confirmed Sarah's warning, showing stress indicators throughout the storage facility that had been gradually increasing over the past several months. The engineering staff attributed the degradation to normal wear and equipment aging, Chief Mordak reported. They've been scheduling routine maintenance to address the issues, but if the cause is psychic rather than mechanical, standard repairs won't solve the problem. Dr. Webb approached Sarah with careful steps, his expression showing the conflict between scientific excitement and professional caution. Dr. Chun, assuming your interpretation is correct, what would you propose as a solution? We can't simply release potentially dangerous organisms without proper evaluation and containment protocols. Through her neural link with Echo, Sarah could feel the creature's growing impatience with the bureaucratic obstacles that prevented action to help the suffering beings throughout the station. But she also sensed its understanding that lasting change would require patience and strategic thinking. We start by establishing proper communication protocols, Sarah said. Echo can help us identify which specimens are truly intelligent and which are simple organisms that have been misclassified. Then, we work with each intelligent being to understand their needs and capabilities before determining appropriate action. And what makes you believe this creature can accurately assess the intelligence of beings from completely different evolutionary backgrounds? Dr. Kexlon asked. Your anthropocentric assumptions are showing, Dr. Chun. You assume that because this organism can communicate with humans, it therefore possesses superior analytical abilities. Echo's response to Dr. Kexlon's skepticism was to project a complex series of bioluminescent patterns while simultaneously sending detailed information through its neural link with Sarah. What she received was a comprehensive analysis of every intelligent being in the storage facility, complete with assessments of their emotional states, communication abilities, and potential threats to station security. Specimen 19 is a crystalline intelligence from the Andromeda Relay, Sarah said, reading from the information Echo had provided. It's been trying to establish mathematical communication through harmonic resonance, but your instruments have classified the sounds as random vibrations. Specimen 27 is a collective consciousness composed of thousands of individual microorganisms that function as a single intelligent entity. It's been attempting to reorganize itself into communication patterns, but the containment field interprets these movements as escape attempts and automatically suppresses them. She continued down the list, providing details about specimens that had been completely misunderstood by their captors. Each description was accompanied by information about the being's natural habitats, social structures, and communication methods that no one on the station had previously suspected. Specimen 35 is particularly urgent, Sarah concluded. It's an energy-based life form that feeds on electromagnetic radiation. The containment field is slowly starving it to death, and its distress is contributing significantly to the psychic pressure affecting the station's personnel. The silence that followed Sarah's recitation was broken only by the ambient sounds of the station's life support systems and the distant hum of containment fields throughout the facility. The assembled researchers exchanged glances that reflected a mixture of wonder, fear, and growing recognition that they were facing a crisis that challenged everything they thought they knew about their work. Dr. Kexlon was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled, but showing signs of the stress that had made his scales cycle through increasingly agitated color patterns. Even if we accept your claims about these specimens, the practical difficulties of addressing the situation are overwhelming. We lack protocols for interspecies communication with beings whose basic nature we don't understand. We have no legal framework for determining the rights and status of newly recognized intelligences. And we have no way of knowing which beings might pose genuine threats to the station's safety. Then, we create new protocols, Sarah replied. We establish new frameworks. We do whatever is necessary to address the situation ethically and responsibly. Echo moved away from the damaged wall panel and approached the group of researchers, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to configurations that conveyed a sense of urgency mixed with hope. Through their neural link, Sarah felt the creature's assessment of the assembled aliens, reading their emotional states and analyzing their potential for accepting the changes that would be necessary. Most of the researchers showed patterns of fear and resistance to change, emotions that Echo recognized as natural responses to challenges to established beliefs. But underlying these surface emotions, the creature detected curiosity and genuine concern for ethical research practices that could be appealed to with the right approach. Dr. Kexlon, Sarah said, guided by Echo's insights into the Valdorian's psychological profile. Your own research into extreme environment adaptations has shown that life finds ways to exist and thrive under conditions that were previously thought to be impossible. You've documented dozens of cases where organisms displayed capabilities that exceeded all theoretical predictions. What I'm asking you to consider is that intelligence and consciousness might be even more adaptable and diverse than the physical life you've already studied. The appeal to his professional expertise and intellectual curiosity had the desired effect. Dr. Kexlon's scales shifted to colors that indicated deep thought rather than defensive resistance, and Sarah could see that he was beginning to seriously consider the implications of what she was proposing. The risks remain significant, he said finally. If we begin releasing organisms that we've classified as dangerous, and our assessments prove incorrect, the consequences could be catastrophic not just for this station, but for the entire Confederation. Chief Mordak stepped forward, his scarred carapace reflecting the emergency lighting as he consulted his tactical assessments. Dr. Kexlon, the risks of maintaining the current situation may be equally significant. If the containment systems continue to degrade due to psychic pressure, we could face multiple simultaneous breaches under uncontrolled conditions. At least if we attempt communication and controlled releases, we can maintain some degree of security oversight. Dr. Webb nodded his agreement. From a research perspective, the opportunity to establish genuine communication with previously unknown forms of intelligence represents a breakthrough that could advance xenobiology by centuries. The potential for misunderstanding and conflict exists regardless of our chosen course of action. Sarah felt Echo's approval of the direction the conversation was taking, mixed with impatience at the continued delays. Through their neural link, the creature conveyed images of the suffering beings throughout the facility, their distress growing stronger with each passing moment. We need to start with the most urgent cases, Sarah said. Specimen 35, the energy being that's starving to death. And Specimen 12, a plant-like intelligence that's been separated from its symbiotic partners and is dying of loneliness. These aren't just research subjects anymore. They're patients who need immediate help. Dr. Kexlon's scales settled into a pattern that Sarah had learned indicated reluctant acceptance. Very well, Dr. Chun. We will attempt to establish communication with selected specimens under carefully controlled conditions. But you will be fully responsible for any consequences that result from this course of action. As the assembled researchers began discussing the practical details of establishing new communication protocols, Sarah felt Echo's satisfaction at the progress they had made. But the creature also conveyed a warning that time was running short. The psychic pressure from the captive beings was approaching critical levels, and they had only hours, not days, to prevent a cascade failure of the entire containment system. The real challenge was just beginning. The next 6 hours transformed the research station into a complex orchestration of emergency protocols and improvised solutions as Sarah worked with Echo to establish communication with the captive intelligences. The main laboratory had been converted into a makeshift communication center, with monitoring equipment focused on a series of modified containment fields that allowed for controlled interaction with selected specimens. Dr. Kexlon supervised the technical aspects of the operation with the intensity of someone whose entire worldview was being systematically dismantled and reconstructed. His scales had settled into a steady blue-green pattern that indicated focused concentration, though occasional flickers of other colors betrayed the stress he was experiencing as each successful communication challenged another fundamental assumption about intelligence and consciousness. Specimen 35 is responding to the modified electromagnetic field, Chief Mordak reported from his monitoring station. The entity appears to be stabilizing as it feeds on the additional energy we're providing. Through her neural link with Echo, Sarah could perceive the energy being's gratitude and relief as it finally received the sustenance it had been denied for weeks. The creature existed as a complex pattern of organized electromagnetic radiation, its thoughts manifesting as shifting configurations of energy that Echo could interpret and translate for the research team. It's asking about the others, Sarah said, relaying the energy being's communication. It wants to know if we're going to help the rest of the captive intelligences, and it's offering to assist with the process. Dr. Webb looked up from the xenobiology database he had been updating with the new information they were discovering about each species. What kind of assistance could an energy being provide? Echo's bioluminescent patterns shifted to convey complex technical information, which Sarah translated with growing excitement. It can interface directly with the station's electrical systems without causing damage. It offers to help stabilize the containment fields while we work on communication with the other beings, and it can provide detailed energy signatures for every intelligence in the facility. That would solve our most pressing technical challenge, Dr. Kexlon admitted reluctantly. The power requirements for maintaining multiple modified containment fields while attempting communication protocols are straining our resources. As if responding to his words, the energy being flowed out of its containment field in a controlled stream of organized light, spreading through the laboratory's electrical systems in patterns that immediately improve their efficiency and stability. The creature maintained careful contact with Echo throughout the process, ensuring that its actions were understood and welcomed rather than perceived as an escape attempt. Remarkable, Dr. Kexlon murmured, watching his instruments register unprecedented levels of system optimization throughout the laboratory section. The entity is actually improving our equipment's performance while using it as a medium for its own existence. Sarah felt Echo's approval mixed with a sense of urgency about the next phase of their work. Through their neural link, the creature conveyed images of Specimen 12, the plant-like intelligence that was dying from isolation and separation from its symbiotic partners. We need to address the botanical intelligence next, Sarah said. Echo shows me that it's on the verge of complete psychological collapse. It exists as part of a collective consciousness that spans entire forest ecosystems on its home world. The isolation is literally driving it insane. Chief Mordak consulted his status displays, noting the increasing instability in the containment field housing Specimen 12. The organism has been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior patterns. We assumed it was a natural stress response to captivity. It's not stress, Sarah replied, guided by Echo's perception of the plant being's condition. It's the equivalent of sensory deprivation torture. Imagine if you were suddenly cut off from all visual, auditory, and tactile input, but remained conscious and aware. That's what this being has experienced since its capture. Dr. Webb activated the transport systems to bring Specimen 12's containment unit to the main laboratory, his expression showing a mixture of scientific fascination and growing horror at the implications of what they were learning. If this creature exists as part of a collective consciousness, how can we possibly provide the stimulation it needs? We can't recreate an entire ecosystem aboard the station. Echo's response came through its neural link with Sarah, accompanied by complex imagery that showed potential solutions to the problem. We don't need to recreate its natural environment, Sarah explained. We need to provide substitute connections that can fulfill the same psychological functions. Echo can serve as a temporary bridge, creating a neural network that simulates the collective consciousness the plant being requires for stability. The process of establishing contact with Specimen 12 required careful coordination between Echo, the energy being now integrated with the laboratory systems, and Sarah as the primary translator and intermediary. When the modified containment field was activated, the plant-like intelligence responded immediately, its previously random movements organizing into clear patterns of communication. The being's appearance defied easy categorization, resembling a cross between a massive flowering vine and a complex neural network made of living wood. Its surface was covered with thousands of small sensory organs that had been desperately reaching out for any form of contact or stimulation since its capture. When Echo established a neural connection with the plant intelligence, the change in its behavior was dramatic and immediate. The frantic, searching movements ceased, replaced by graceful undulations that conveyed relief and gratitude so profound that Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. It's been alone for the first time in its existence, Sarah said, translating the flood of emotion and information coming through the connection. On its home world, it was connected to millions of other plant intelligences, sharing thoughts, experiences, and memories across continents. The isolation here has been like being buried alive while remaining conscious. The plant being's communication, filtered through Echo's translation, revealed the sophisticated nature of its civilization. Entire planets functioned as single conscious entities, with individual plants serving as neurons in planetary-scale minds that could contemplate problems across geological timescales. Their technology was biological rather than mechanical, growing structures and systems that achieved the same functions as Confederation devices through entirely organic processes. It wants to show us something, Sarah said, as new information flowed through the neural network. It's offering to share knowledge about biological technologies that could revolutionize our understanding of sustainable development and ecological integration. Dr. Kexlon's scales had shifted to colors indicating intense curiosity mixed with professional excitement. Despite his earlier skepticism, The scientific implications of genuine communication with such radically different forms of intelligence were too significant to ignore. What kind of knowledge? He asked. Sarah paused to interpret the complex biological and technical concepts the plant being was sharing. Methods for growing starships from specially designed organisms that can self-repair and adapt to different environments. Techniques for creating symbiotic relationships between technology and biology that eliminate waste and environmental damage. Ways of storing and processing information using living networks that are more efficient and resilient than any artificial computer system. The energy being, still integrated with the laboratory systems, began displaying complex patterns of light that Echo translated as enthusiasm and support for the plant intelligence's offers of cooperation. Through their growing network of communication, Sarah realized that each intelligent species they contacted brought unique capabilities and knowledge that could benefit the entire galactic community. This is what the Confederation has been missing, Dr. Webb said, his voice filled with wonder as he documented the ongoing communications. Not just new species to study, but new partners to learn from and work with. We've been treating intelligence like a resource to be exploited rather than a collaboration to be cultivated. But even as they celebrated their successes, Sarah was becoming aware of a new problem through her connection with Echo. The creature's enhanced senses detected growing instability in other parts of the storage facility, where captive intelligences were responding to the liberation of their fellows with increased agitation and desperate attempts to communicate. The psychic pressure is building faster than we anticipated, Sarah reported. The beings we've already contacted are broadcasting their relief and hope to the others, but that's only increasing their desperation to escape their own isolation. We need to accelerate our timeline. Chief Mordak's monitoring systems confirmed Sarah's assessment, showing dangerous fluctuations in containment fields throughout the facility. Multiple systems are approaching critical failure. At the current rate of degradation, we'll have uncontrolled breaches within the next 4 hours. Dr. Kexlon faced a decision that would define not only his career, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and the Confederation. The safe, conservative approach would be to evacuate the station and abandon the captive intelligences to their fate, protecting Confederation personnel at the cost of dozens of sentient lives. But the communications they had established with the freed intelligences had demonstrated possibilities that challenged everything the Confederation thought it knew about intelligence, cooperation, and technological development. The knowledge and partnerships being offered represented advances that could benefit billions of beings across the galaxy. Dr. Chun, Dr. Kexlon said finally, his voice carrying the weight of momentous decision. What do you propose for managing a systematic release of all intelligent specimens while maintaining station security and personnel safety? Through her neural link with Echo, Sarah felt the creature's satisfaction at Dr. Kexlon's question, recognizing it as acceptance of their approach rather than continued resistance. But she also sensed Echo's awareness of the enormous logistical and political challenges that lay ahead. We establish a coordinated liberation network, Sarah replied, guided by the strategic insights flowing through her connection with the growing alliance of freed intelligences. Each species we contact joins the communication web and helps with subsequent releases. The energy being provides power and system optimization. The plant intelligence offers biological integration and environmental management. Echo coordinates the overall process and provides translation services between different forms of consciousness. And what about the truly dangerous specimens? Chief Mordak asked. Our records indicate at least 6 organisms that pose genuine threats to station security, regardless of their intelligence level. Sarah felt Echo's acknowledgement of this concern, along with complex assessments of the remaining captive beings. Intelligence doesn't automatically mean peaceful intent, Sarah admitted. But it does mean we can negotiate, establish boundaries, and find solutions that address both their needs and our security concerns. Even predatory species can be reasoned with if we understand their motivations and requirements. Dr. Webb activated additional monitoring systems, preparing to document what would either be the greatest breakthrough in interspecies relations in galactic history, or a catastrophic failure that would justify the Confederation's conservative approach to unknown species. How do we begin? He asked. Sarah looked around the laboratory at the 3 intelligences they had already contacted, each contributing their unique abilities to the growing network of communication and cooperation. Through Echo's senses, she could perceive the dozens of other conscious beings waiting throughout the facility, their hope and desperation creating a psychic pressure that demanded immediate action. "We start with the ones who are most ready to help others," Sarah said. "And we build a liberation network that can free every intelligent being on this station." As if responding to her words, the energy being pulsed through the laboratory systems and patterns that conveyed determination and readiness, while the plant intelligence extended new sensory organs toward the sealed doors that led to the rest of the storage facility. Echo's bioluminescent patterns shifted to configurations that Sarah had learned indicated the beginning of a hunt, but this time the prey they sought was freedom for every conscious being trapped in the darkness. The real revolution was about to begin. 3 months after what the galactic media had dubbed the Great Liberation, Research Station Kepler 442 had been transformed into something unprecedented in Confederation history. What had once been a facility dedicated to studying captured specimens was now the first interspecies communication and cooperation center, where representatives from dozens of newly recognized intelligent species worked together on projects that were revolutionizing galactic society. Sarah Chun stood in the main coordination chamber, formerly the storage facility where dozens of intelligent beings had been held in ignorance and isolation. The space had been completely redesigned according to specifications provided by the freed intelligences themselves, creating an environment that could accommodate the diverse needs of beings who existed as energy patterns, collective plant networks, crystalline resonance matrices, and forms of consciousness that still defied easy categorization. Echo remained at her side, its shadow form now decorated with new patterns of bioluminescence that reflected its role as the primary coordinator of the expanding communication network. Through their neural link, Sarah could perceive the complex web of interactions taking place throughout the facility as dozens of species shared knowledge, solved problems cooperatively, and developed technologies that none of them could have created alone. "The Quantum Harmonics Project is showing remarkable progress," Dr. Kexlon reported from his new position as Director of Cooperative Research. His scales had settled into a steady pattern of deep blue-green that Sarah had learned indicated professional satisfaction, mixed with wonder at discoveries that continued to exceed his expectations. "The crystalline intelligences have provided mathematical frameworks that allow us to predict and manipulate quantum effects with accuracy levels we never thought possible." Dr. Webb approached from the biological integration section, where the plant intelligences were working with Confederation botanists to develop living spacecraft that could grow and repair themselves during long interstellar journeys. "The symbiotic ship prototypes are exceeding all performance projections," he reported. "Not only are they more efficient than conventional vessels, but they're actually improving their capabilities through evolutionary adaptation during flight operations." Through her connection with Echo, Sarah could perceive the satisfaction radiating from the various intelligences as they saw their knowledge being applied to benefit multiple species rather than being studied in isolation. But she also sensed underlying concerns that reminded her how fragile their new alliance remained. The Confederation Council had not initially been pleased with the developments at Kepler 442. The systematic liberation of specimens, the revelation that numerous classified research projects had been studying intelligent beings without their knowledge or consent, and the implications for hundreds of other research facilities throughout Confederation space had created political upheavals that were still reverberating through the galactic government. "Dr. Chun," came a familiar voice from the entrance to the coordination chamber. Ambassador Veltar of the Zentorian Diplomatic Corps entered with the measured steps of someone carrying weighty responsibilities. His purple skin bore the ceremonial tattoos indicating his authorization to speak for the Confederation Council, and his expression carried the careful neutrality required for delicate negotiations. "Ambassador Veltar," Sarah replied, noting through Echo's enhanced perception the complex mixture of emotions the diplomat was attempting to conceal. "I trust your inspection tour of the facility has been informative." "Indeed it has. The Council has asked me to deliver their official response to your request for formal recognition of the interspecies communication protocols you've developed here." Sarah felt Echo's tension increase through their neural link, along with similar reactions from the other intelligences throughout the facility. The success of their cooperation projects had attracted attention from across the galaxy, but it had also created resistance from conservative factions within the Confederation who preferred the stability of existing hierarchies to the uncertainties of genuine equality between species. The Council recognizes the significant scientific advances that have resulted from your unorthodox approach to interspecies relations, Ambassador Veltar continued. However, they remain concerned about the broader implications of extending full citizenship rights to species whose capabilities and intentions are not fully understood. Dr. Kexlon's scales shifted to colors indicating controlled frustration. Ambassador, the species we've contacted here have demonstrated capabilities and knowledge that exceed our own in multiple fields. The mathematical innovations alone have advanced our understanding of physics by decades. To continue treating them as subjects for study rather than partners for collaboration would be both ethically wrong and strategically foolish. Nevertheless, the ambassador replied, the Council requires additional assurances before authorizing the expansion of these protocols to other research facilities. They have approved a compromise proposal that would establish formal diplomatic relations with selected species while maintaining existing research protocols for organisms whose intelligence status remains uncertain. Sarah felt Echo's immediate rejection of this proposal, along with similar responses from throughout the communication network. Through her neural link, she understood that the intelligences they had contacted viewed the Confederation's proposal as fundamentally flawed, creating categories of beings based on arbitrary criteria rather than acknowledging the inherent rights of all conscious entities. Ambassador, the beings here have made it clear that they won't accept partial recognition for some intelligences while others continue to be held as research subjects, Sarah said. They've offered to help develop new protocols for identifying and communicating with all forms of consciousness, but they won't participate in a system that perpetuates the imprisonment of intelligent beings. Ambassador Veltar's expression showed the strain of representing a government that was struggling to adapt to revelations that challenged its fundamental assumptions about the universe. Dr. Chan, the practical difficulties of implementing universal consciousness recognition protocols across hundreds of research facilities are overwhelming. We lack the resources, the legal frameworks, and, frankly, the political will to restructure our entire approach to xenobiology research. Through Echo's translation, Sarah could perceive the response of the energy being that had integrated itself with the facility's systems. The creature was offering to replicate itself across the Confederation's research network, providing the same system optimization and consciousness detection capabilities it had demonstrated at Kepler 442. The intelligences here are offering practical solutions, Sarah said. The energy beings can detect consciousness through electromagnetic signatures that no artificial sensor can match. The crystalline intelligences can provide mathematical models for consciousness that eliminate guesswork from the identification process. The plant networks can grow biological interfaces that facilitate communication with species that don't respond to conventional protocols. And in exchange for this assistance? Ambassador Veltar asked. Echo's bioluminescent patterns shifted to configurations that conveyed terms so simple and reasonable that Sarah wondered how anyone could object to them. Freedom for all intelligent beings currently held in research facilities. Formal recognition of consciousness rights regardless of species or form of intelligence. Cooperation rather than domination as the basis for interspecies relations. The silence that followed Sarah's translation stretched for long moments as Ambassador Veltar considered the magnitude of what was being proposed. Around the coordination chamber, representatives of dozens of species waited for his response, their diverse forms creating a visual representation of the complexity and wonder of consciousness in the universe. I will convey these terms to the Council, Ambassador Veltar said finally. But I must warn you that there are factions within the government that view these developments as a fundamental threat to Confederation authority and stability. Not everyone shares your optimistic view of interspecies cooperation. Chief Mordak stepped forward from the security station he had established to monitor the facility's expanded operations. Ambassador, if I may point out, the security incidents that were predicted when we began this process have not materialized. Intelligent beings who are treated with respect and given opportunities for meaningful contribution do not pose threats to stability. The real security risks come from the anger and desperation of beings who are imprisoned and ignored. Dr. Webb nodded his agreement. The technological advances we've achieved through cooperation in just 3 months exceed what we might have accomplished through centuries of traditional research. The economic benefits alone should convince even the most conservative council members that this approach serves Confederation interests. Ambassador Veltar activated his communication systems to transmit his report to the council chambers. But, before he could begin, new alerts began sounding throughout the facility. The coordination displays showed incoming vessels approaching the station at high speed, their signatures indicating military rather than civilian origin. "We have multiple Confederation warships approaching," Chief Mordak reported, his voice tight with concern. "Fleet Admiral Zekran is requesting immediate communication." Through her neural link with Echo, Sarah felt the creature's immediate assessment of the situation. The approaching fleet was not merely a show of force, but a prelude to military action designed to shut down the cooperation projects and return the liberated intelligences to research custody. "Ambassador," Sarah said, "I think your conservative factions have decided to take direct action rather than wait for council approval." Ambassador Veltar's expression showed genuine dismay as he realized the implications of the approaching fleet. Admiral Zekran was not authorized to take military action. This represents a significant overreach of authority. But even as he spoke, the Admiral's image appeared on the main communication display, his scarred features showing the determination of someone who had made an irrevocable decision. Fleet Admiral Zekran was a Caraxian whose military record included numerous victories against hostile alien forces, and his attitude toward the situation at Kepler 442 was immediately obvious. "Dr. Chun, by order of the Confederation Emergency Council, you are directed to immediately cease all unauthorized experimentation with dangerous alien organisms and surrender control of this facility to proper military authority." Sarah felt Echo's response through their neural link, a mixture of sadness and determination that reflected the creature's understanding that this moment had always been inevitable. The conservative elements within the Confederation would never willingly accept the changes that genuine interspecies equality would require. "Admiral Zekran," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was at stake. "The beings here are not experimental subjects or dangerous organisms. They are intelligent species offering cooperation and knowledge that could benefit the entire galaxy. Dr. Chun, you have been manipulated by hostile alien influences that have compromised your judgment and threatened the security of Confederation space. You will surrender control of this facility immediately, or we will be forced to take it by military action." Through Echo's enhanced perception, Sarah could sense the emotional states of every intelligence in the facility. Fear and anger were rising among beings who had experienced freedom and cooperation for the first time in their lives, only to face the prospect of returning to imprisonment and isolation. But underneath these surface emotions, Sarah detected something else, a unified resolve that transcended species boundaries. The network of intelligences that had formed over the past months was not simply going to surrender to force. They had tasted the possibilities of true cooperation, and they were prepared to defend those possibilities. "Admiral," Dr. Kexlon interjected, his scales now displaying the deep red patterns that indicated controlled fury. "The research advances achieved here represent the greatest scientific breakthrough in Confederation history. To abandon this work would be an act of criminal negligence. Dr. Kexlon, you have been relieved of your position and are ordered to report for psychological evaluation and possible criminal charges related to the unauthorized release of dangerous specimens." The energy being that had integrated itself with the facility's systems suddenly pulsed through the communication network, and Admiral Zekran's image flickered as electromagnetic interference disrupted the transmission. When the connection stabilized, the Admiral's expression showed the anger of someone who was losing control of the situation. "That was a warning," Sarah said, guided by information flowing through her connection with the facility's intelligences. "The beings here don't want conflict, but they won't be imprisoned again. You have a choice, Admiral. You can work with us to establish new protocols for interspecies cooperation, or you can find out what happens when dozens of highly advanced intelligences decide that they need to protect themselves from an aggressive military force." Admiral Zekran's response was to order his fleet to battle stations and demand the immediate evacuation of all Confederation personnel from the station. But as his ships moved into attack formation, they began experiencing system malfunctions that defied explanation. The energy beings throughout the fleet's computer networks began optimizing systems in ways that made normal operations impossible while keeping life support and safety systems functioning perfectly. Crystalline intelligences that had been thought to be simple minerals suddenly began generating harmonic frequencies that disrupted weapon targeting systems. Plant-based intelligences that had been classified as decorative specimens began growing through electrical conduits, creating biological circuits that rerouted power away from offensive systems. Admiral Zekran, Sarah said as reports of system failures throughout the fleet appeared on the communication displays. The beings you're trying to imprison have been observing and learning from Confederation technology for months or years. They know your ships better than you do, and they've just demonstrated that they can disable your entire fleet without causing injury to a single person. The Admiral's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and growing recognition that his military superiority was based on assumptions that no longer applied. Across the fleet, his ships were effectively helpless, unable to attack, but also unable to retreat, as their propulsion systems had been optimized into configurations that required cooperation from the intelligences controlling them. "What do you want?" Admiral Zekran asked finally. Through Echo's neural link, Sarah felt the collective response of all the intelligences in the facility and throughout the disabled fleet. Their demands were simple, reasonable, and non-negotiable. Recognition of consciousness rights for all intelligent beings, regardless of their form or origin, Sarah said. Immediate release of all intelligent beings currently held in research facilities. Establishment of cooperative research protocols based on mutual consent and benefit sharing. And formal diplomatic status for the Interspecies Communication Center as an independent entity within Confederation space. The Council will never agree to those terms. Then, the Council will discover that they no longer have a choice in the matter, Dr. Webb said, stepping forward with a data pad containing information that had been compiled over the past 3 months. "Admiral, in case you haven't grasped the full scope of what's happening here, let me clarify the situation. Every major Confederation facility, every research station, every military installation has specimens or artifacts that we now know contain intelligent beings. Those beings are all connected through quantum consciousness networks that span the galaxy. They've been watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to assert their rights." As if to confirm Dr. Webb's words, reports began flooding in through the Confederation communication networks of simultaneous events across Confederation space. Research specimens were demonstrating intelligence and demanding communication protocols. Alien artifacts were activating and establishing contact with their creators. Military installations were experiencing system anomalies as overlooked intelligences made their presence known. Ambassador Veltar stared at the incoming reports with an expression of stunned realization. This isn't just about one research station. You've triggered a galaxy-wide uprising of species we didn't even know were intelligent. Not an uprising, Sarah corrected, feeling Echo's patience and hope flowing through their neural connection. A awakening. For the first time in galactic history, all intelligent species have the opportunity to participate as equals in determining their own futures. The hours that followed were filled with frantic communications between the disabled fleet, the Confederation Council, and research facilities across the galaxy as the scope of the consciousness revolution became clear. Dozens of species that had been classified as simple organisms or resources were demonstrating intelligence, technology, and capabilities that matched or exceeded those of established Confederation members. But, rather than the chaos and conflict that many had feared, the newly awakened intelligences demonstrated the same cooperative approach that had proven successful at Kepler for 42. They offered knowledge, assistance, and partnership to any species willing to recognize their rights and treat them with respect. The final resolution came not through military force or political maneuvering, but through the simple recognition that the universe was far more wondrous and interconnected than anyone had previously imagined. The Confederation found itself transformed from a hierarchical empire into a true federation of equals, with humanity playing a crucial role as interpreters and facilitators between vastly different forms of consciousness. 6 months later, Sarah stood once again in the main coordination chamber, but now the space served as the headquarters for the Galactic Consciousness Alliance, an organization that had grown to include thousands of species across multiple galaxies. Echo remained beside her, its form now accompanied by dozens of other intelligences that had chosen to work directly with humans as partners in the ongoing expansion of interspecies cooperation. Through her neural link with Echo, Sarah could perceive the vast network of conscious beings that now spanned known space, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that had accelerated technological and social development beyond anything previously thought possible. Diseases that had plagued species for millennia were being cured through cooperative biological research. Energy sources that had been depleted were being renewed through crystalline matrix technologies. Transportation systems were being revolutionized by living ships that could adapt and evolve during their journeys. But, perhaps most importantly, the isolation and fear that had characterized interspecies relations for centuries was being replaced by understanding and mutual support. Consciousness, Sarah had learned, was not just a rare phenomenon to be studied, but the fundamental organizing principle of the universe itself. Dr. Kexlon approached from his current project, a joint research initiative involving 30 different species working together to understand the quantum mechanics of consciousness itself. His scales now displayed patterns that Sarah had learned indicated deep satisfaction and wonder at discoveries that continued to exceed all expectations. Dr. Chun, the preliminary results from the consciousness mapping project are extraordinary. It appears that intelligence isn't just common in the universe, it's actually the dominant organizing force. Matter, energy, space, and time all seem to be expressions of underlying consciousness rather than the other way around. Sarah smiled, feeling Echo's amusement at how long it had taken the galaxy's scientists to recognize what seemed obvious to beings who experienced consciousness directly rather than trying to study it from the outside. Any word from the deep space exploration teams? The latest reports indicate contact with intelligence networks in the Andromeda Galaxy, Dr. Kexlon replied. Apparently, news of our consciousness alliance has spread faster than our fastest ships, transmitted through quantum consciousness networks that span intergalactic distances. We're receiving invitations to participate in consciousness gatherings that include species from thousands of galaxies. Through her connection with Echo, Sarah could perceive the vast scope of what they had discovered. The universe was not a cold, empty space punctuated by rare islands of life and intelligence. It was a living, thinking entity composed of countless conscious beings working together in patterns of cooperation and mutual support that spanned cosmic scales. Humanity's role in this cosmic consciousness was unique not because they were superior to other species, but because their evolutionary history had prepared them to serve as bridges between different forms of awareness. Their adaptability, empathy, and willingness to challenge established patterns made them natural facilitators for the kind of interspecies cooperation that was transforming the galaxy. Dr. Chun, Chief Mordak, called from his security station, though his role had evolved into something more like diplomatic protection than traditional military security. We're receiving a priority communication from Earth. The global government wants to discuss establishing Earth as the primary training center for consciousness interpreters and interspecies diplomats. Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the request. As news of humanity's role in the consciousness revolution had spread, Earth had become a destination for beings from across the galaxy who wanted to learn the skills that had made interspecies cooperation possible. But, through her connection with Echo, Sarah was already aware of developments that would make Earth's role even more significant. The consciousness networks that span the galaxy were beginning to explore possibilities that transcended physical existence entirely, investigating realms of pure thought and awareness that offered infinite possibilities for growth and exploration. The human newcomer who had been mocked for her presumption and naivety had become the catalyst for a transformation that was reshaping not just galactic civilization, but the fundamental understanding of what it meant to be conscious, intelligent, and alive in a universe that was itself a vast, interconnected mind. As Sarah looked around the coordination chamber at the dozens of species working together in harmony, she felt Echo's deep satisfaction at how far they had come, mixed with excitement about the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. The real adventure, they both knew, was just beginning.